So in our previous video, we discussed the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system activation, which all falls under what we call the autonomic nervous system. And we had talked a little bit about what the body naturally does. For example, when it's in a state of threat or when it's able to sleep and go into what we call custodial services. And things like training, where you could be doing it through forms of external connection and therapy, or you could do it through forms of movement. Now, I want to talk to you about how you can be in more control of this inbuilt system and when your body goes into this state of sympathetic activation. If it's going in because of a true threat to survival, like a tiger in your face, we want our body to go into this so we can protect our survival. But if your body is going into this, for example, for mental stress, something that cannot be changed or managed by just stressing about it, examples of that could be relationship stress or financial stress. In situations where the stress is all in the brain and we know there is something that is going to stress our body and our mind, but sitting and stressing about it isn't helping us find solutions. What I want you to do is start thinking about how can I take my body from this activation to this activation where I can start multi-focusing and coming up with things like solutions without actively damaging my organs or creating systemic inflammation sitting in this category for too long. And the real way that we focus on that is through this thing called the vagus nerve and activating this vagus nerve. This is a very, very important nerve that comes from the brain. And when it comes outside of the brain, it goes and it acts on some very, very particular organ systems. And we're going to talk about two of them. In this video, we're going to focus on the vagus nerve innervation of your lungs and your diaphragm. And this innervation can be activated by breathing. When you take deep breaths, you are able to activate this vagus nerve, which, like I said, innervates both the heart and the lungs and the diaphragm. And as you start activating this nerve using something like deep breathing, you are able to send signals back to the brain to try to convince it to go from this state to this state. Now, I want to give you an example of how the body already does this. If you may be that person that you have a good night's rest, maybe you take medications to help you or you found a way to continue getting that good night's rest, but because of this internal stress, you are just exhausted throughout the day nonetheless. Or you're yawning and it's an inappropriate yawn during the middle of the day when you're trying to be productive. Another example is when you're experiencing levels of anxiety that are getting in the way of your functionality, where again, your heart rate is very high, your blood pressure is very high, you're hyper-focused, maybe even to the point of an anxiety attack. In all of these situations, our body is sitting in this hyper state, which is the sympathetic activation. And by inducing this vagus nerve, taking a few deep breaths in that situation itself, we are able to activate our brain to move it into the direction of the parasympathetic activity. Now, sometimes doing that only in the moment, right, when you're experiencing maybe that anxiety attack or that exhaustion can be very difficult for the body. And so one way we like to talk about doing this more is by practicing deep breathing, practicing it in the morning or practicing it at nighttime when you're going to bed. Just laying there and taking 5 or 6 deep breaths and seeing what happens to your mind, seeing how maybe your thoughts slow down. Seeing that maybe just 5, 6 breaths could even put you into sleep, because that is the beauty of the activation of this vagus nerve. As you start practicing deep breathing, then when you're in a stressful situation, you've already experienced what breathing can do, and you can induce that in order to reduce that form of anxiety or reduce that excess stress, sleep, and exhaustion, and try to move your body into a state of parasympathetic activation, which will allow you to be more well, more holistic, and actually multi-focus or come up with solutions to your problems. In the next video, we're going to look at another way that the vagus nerve gets induced and a few more solutions similar to that. So see you very soon.